Hello everyone. Welcome to another session of our COVID classes. Last class we were talking about the determinants of disease, and we have covered the host and agent determinants when it comes to a disease. Today we will be covering the third arm of the epidemiological triad, which is the environment. Last class you might have remembered that environment is very important, and it includes both the natural and the social environment of an animal. A social environment means the of an animal means the hierarchy within a herd, the farm, the management practice, etc. So today we will be learning about the the environment determinants of a disease. So what are the environment determinants of disease? The environmental determinants are the location of the animal, then the climate, the husbandry practices, the management practices, the diet of the animal, and various kinds of stress that an animal has to go through when it comes to a disease. So what do you mean by location, or how does location affect uh, the health of an animal? So location means the geographical formation, the geographical location, and the geographical location will have peculiar geographic formations. There will be particular vegetation and other features that help in producing a disease or help in averting a disease. For example, bracken fern is found on certain geographical features. There should be adequate climatic and other features that help the bracken to grow. And when the animal feeds on this bracken, then there is risk of development of tumors in the jaws or hematuria. So that is the importance of location. Similarly, pollution, even in canines, canine respiratory complications, pneumonia or other respiratory difficulties in canine has been strongly associated with the level of pollution. So dogs that are located on urban landscape will be more suffering more from, or the more number of dogs will be affected with respiratory issues than the dogs that are from suburban or rural settings. So in these cases the location plays a very important role, and whenever we are describing the disease occurrence, we will have to trace out where all the diseases have occurred, and this is known as a mapping of disease. And mapping shows the importance of location when it comes to a disease. Then there is the determinant called the climate. Now climate can be the macroclimate or microclimate. Macroclimate means all the macroclimatological features itself, like the sunlight, humidity, rainfall, wind, etc. All these will have its effect on both the host as well as the agent. So when it comes to host, we have already discussed about the white coat color in cats, which the risk of developing squamous cell carcinoma in white colored cats increases when it is more exposed to the sunlight. So there is squamous cell carcinoma is directly influenced by the macroclimatic environmental determinant called ultraviolet radiations. And similarly, excess amount of ultraviolet radiation is known to cause the loosening of the corneal epithelium. And when such animals are infected with bacteria like Moraxella, the severity of keratoconjunctivitis increases. So this the ambient sunlight, as in climates or seasons where the ambient sunlight increases, there will be increased number of cases with Moraxella induced keratoconjunctivitis. It can be summer or in cold countries, in winter also, where the excess of UV light is reflected back because of the presence of snow. Similarly, this macroclimate has an effect on the agent also. So we have been debating in this corona epidemic itself. There were varying opinions that the hot temperature or the warm temperature of our state is detrimental to this organism. Anyway, those are there are no validations that has happened yet, but the ambient climate can affect the host survival, the agent's survival also. For example, temperature, high temperature or high ambient temperature generally is, especially in the tropical places like ours, generally it is detrimental to many of the pathogens. Similarly, humidity. For example, if the humidity is very high, then it is known that the bovine rhinoviruses are known to survive. Whereas if the humidity is low, it actually favors bovine rhinotracheitis virus. So humidity plays a role in selecting the natural selection of pathogens in an area. Then there is wind. So we have already talked about the aerial transmission of FMD, where the FMD virus is carried through the wind and transmitted to the very distant areas. And we have also told about the role of wind in transporting the vectors. If you remember the how wind had picked up BT virus infected Culicoides from Africa to Portugal. So the viruses or the vectors are also known to move along with the wind. Another interesting feature is of drought, and the interesting example is babesiosis in lions of Africa. So what happens is that ticks are very sensitive to this drought, and when there is a severe drought in a place that has is known for ticks, what happens is that the tick population comes down significantly. And then what happens is that when the rains return, ticks utilize these rains, because the entire tick population would have otherwise wiped out, and only the eggs may be remaining. And as soon as rains happen, these eggs hatches out and reinfest the whole of this lost niche, and that will increase a severe tick or a very heavy tick population after when rainfalls happen after a drought season. Then what happens is that then the number of lions affected with the babesiosis also simultaneously increases, because this thing is transovarially transmitted. So all the ova that are hatching, and these larvae will also be carrying the Babesia organism, and when they go and infect the lion which are roaming, these lions also get infected with babesiosis. So it has a seasonal influence. Now then we are living in a era of climate change. So people are talking about greenhouse gases, climate change and its role, and this has many effects on the health of both humans and animals. So there are various instances. So what is greenhouse effect? Greenhouse effect is the excess amount of carbon dioxide or other gases that are put out because of the emergence of or because of the industrial revolution. The ambient atmospheric amount of carbon dioxide is increasing steadily, and this will capture the incoming high energy radiation and prevents the escape of infrared light back to the escape of infrared light from the Earth's atmosphere. Thereby the global temperature increases, and when the global temperature increases, there will be changes in the climatic pattern of the world. So this is known as the climate change, and climate change is known to have both direct and indirect effect. It is also said that climate change can both positively and negatively affect the distribution of disease. For when we talk about the direct influence, then there is increase in temperature. Some parts of the world may be having increased rain, some parts there may be drought, and these all will directly affect the both the socio-economic aspect of people as well as the farming systems, and the directly affect the health of the animals and humans also. Those are the direct effect of climate change. Then there are indirect effects also. So indirect effects happen when, as many of these factors causing climate change will result in increased rain or increased temperature, and those factors can result in conditions of flood, drought, etc. And these flood or drought or the secondary features of the primary climate change will cause distribution variation in disease. So for example, Kerala, we have been battling worst of the floods that is known in our ours or our parents generation, and maybe these are because of the climate change itself. Now what happens is that once floods happen, the water stagnation will give rise to various epidemics including cholera. Then there will be overpopulation of mosquitoes and those diseases. So these are happening in as an indirect effect of the major problem of this climate change. So that is how climate change affects directly and indirectly. Similarly, as I told regarding vectors, there will be an effect on vectors also, and the vector population also changes. For example, global warming has resulted in increased ambient temperature in otherwise cold regions of France. So blue tongue again was not known to French people, but it was very much present in a neighboring country of England. So it is now seen that the distribution of these culicoides that are traditionally carrying the blue tongue or traditionally getting infected with the blue tongue virus has moved further north of the latitude. So this is believed because the areas that were colder and unsuitable for the vector population have become warmer, and now the vectors are finding the climates suitable for their survival, and thus the virus is extending in its distribution northwards. So as a result of climate change, there can be distribution of both viruses as well as vector-borne diseases, and vector-borne diseases it's not as easy to control as other diseases. So vector-borne diseases, the distribution of vector-borne diseases can of course change in response to the climate change that are happening in the world. Okay, then there is microclimate. So microclimate can be the smaller the climatic factors or the physical features and the ambient features that are immediately surrounding an animal. So this can be in the microclimate of the floor of a farm, on the surface of an animal, or up to maybe the environment inside a barn house. So those are the microclimate, and it can be as told terrestrial or biological. So terrestrial climatic features means the floor or the ground in which the animal lives, and also if the ground is very damp, it can help the survival of pathogens like ankylostomes or strongyloid as a typical example, so that it can penetrate through the skin and all. Then it can be biological also, like the surface of the animal. So the feature of this biological microclimate is that it can change with the course of the disease. For example, when a person is infected with malaria, what happens is that during the course he will be profusely sweating in relation to the parasitemia. So when the load of the parasite increases in the bloodstream, the changes in the patient will make the patient to sweat more. So as the sweating increases, it becomes very easy for mosquito vectors to detect the presence of the humans, and there is a more chance for the mosquitoes to bite such a person, and that will aid in the transmission of this pathogen. So those are biological microclimate. Then when you consider a farm setting, the inside of a farm can be called as a climate of its own. Then this is more important when the system of farming becomes more intensive. You take an example of a poultry house. In an industrialized farm or a very intensively rearing farm, there are systems like environmentally controlled house, where all the environmental features can be controlled. So you can set up a very cozy, comfortable barn for an animal or a group of animals in amidst in between a desert, like you see in the Gulf countries. So the environment inside a farm can be a determinant. So if the dust, the litter is very dusty, it can cause many difficulties. Then if the ammonia level is increasing and it is not evacuated properly, then there can be respiratory problems for poultry, birds and all. So that is the how microclimate affects the occurrence or distribution of disease. Now when it comes to husbandry, um, the husbandry includes the various the design of a house, or how the ventilation is done, how the stocks are, or how the what are the bedding materials. So flooring, the nature of flooring, all these things affects the or act as determinants of disease. So ventilation, I have told about the ammonia issue. Then bedding materials, if it is too dusty, it can cause problems. It is if it is not clean, then bedding material is a potent source when it comes to environmental mastitis. And similarly, in case of flooring, it is said that it is seen that slippery floors, if the floors are very slippery, naturally there is an increased risk for animals to fall down, and there will be an increased cases of lameness. Then similarly, in our place also, if you can see that if you go to a progressive dairy farmer, you will see that all the cows are standing on rubber mats. Why? Because rubber mats are found to be more comfortable for the animal to stand than when you place them on a level on a concrete floor. But since these animals have been kept on a rubber mat for a long time, there can be associated hoof lesions also. So those are how these things happen. And similarly, there is case of providing an increased slope. When the slope of a farm is increased, or a pig farm is increased, what happens is that there will be an increased chance of rectal prolapse. It is seen that the cases of rectal prolapse in pigs also increases. So that is husbandry. Then there is management. So management means the stocking density, how much stock I should put in my farm, how should I be replacing the animals, those things. Then what are the purpose of for which I am keeping an animal. These things can also have an influence on the, or can act as an environmental determinant. So stocking density, if the stocking density is very high, you will see that the number of cases of respiratory diseases or respiratory cases increases. Similarly, if I am deciding to, if I have a big farm and I decide that I will replace my animals from the animals that are I raise in from my farm itself. So for example, if I'm having a dairy farm, and I decide that whatever female calves that I get, I will be putting them as the next crop or the next source of my farm's milk production, then I am not at all purchasing any animal from outside. So this is that becomes a closed system. Or if I am deciding that no, I will not be focusing on breeding the animal, I will be focusing only on production. So every year or so I will be bringing in new animals, then the system becomes open, and then there is risk of importing a disease from outside. So depending upon the management plans that you have, the frequencies or the diversity of diseases inside your farm also will vary. So that is the management aspect. And then there is occupation. Anyway, the occupation part is usually concerned with the human medicine. For example, sportsmen, their occupation is different, so they will have a different set of injuries. Me being a teacher who is always behind a desk or something, maybe typing or writing something, then I will have another set of injuries. So these things will can happen in animals also. For example, the example of yoke gall I told. So when a bullock or a ox is being put into work, then there is increased risk of yoke gall. So that is associated with the occupation of an animal is a managemental decision. So thus the management becomes an environmental determinant of a disease. Then there is diet. So many of the diseases that are directly connected with the diet, like energy deficiency can cause ketosis, vitamin deficiency can cause many other deficiency diseases, mineral deficiency. Then it is all directly or indirectly connected with the production also. So those are the directly evident, and that can be taken care of easily. But there are certain other things where the deficiency or defect in feeding or the nature of the diet will have some outcome which many of these are not directly cannot be directly established. For example, example is the case of the food lesions in sows. So it is seen that in many places when the diet is deficient of biotin, the food lesion in sows increases. So it is, for now it is not known why, what is the reason, because if you give a proper deficient diet, biotin deficient diet to a sow, then the development of clinical signs or disease that develop is totally different from mere absence of foot lesion or the mere the presence of foot lesions. So diet can have directly evident or cases where there is no direct evidence, but it is influencing, diet can influence many of these conditions. Then feeding regimen is another important thing. So if you have a dog, if you are feeding giving a heavy feed food at one time, so single time feeding, if you are practicing single time feeding, then there is a risk of gastric volvulus. Similarly, in case of pigs also, gastric torsion is very common in pigs that are given a single time feed. So heavy feed at one time will cause this. So some people will be giving the same quantity of feed for like it is divided into 2 or 3 times a day. So then the gastric torsion in such farms or in such households are very less. Then there is stress. So stress is a very very commonly used word whenever it comes to disease. So what can be a cause of disease? The answer will be, most often the answer tends to be stress, but it has been conveniently used for as a blanket statement for many factors that are unknown. So it is not like that. So stress has a proper definition, and stress is an animal's response to a noxious stimuli. So these stimuli are known as stressors, and the response is known as stress. So for a stress to happen, there should be a noxious stimuli, and the general changes in an animal that happens in relation to a stress is known as a general adaptation syndrome, and it is derived from the studies that are being conducted on laboratory animals. It can be somewhat adapted to animals and to much extent humans also. So there are 3 phases when it comes to stress. Those are a general alarm reaction, a phase of resistance, and a phase of reaction. As a part of general alarm reaction, it is seen that these animals will have an increased liver, spleen, etc. as soon as a stress is induced. So these are because in response to various changes that happens. Then there is a phase of resistance where the animal will try to resist the stress that is being induced, and then later on, if the stress is not overcome, then the body will start to adapt to this change. These include variation in cortisol production and all. Many a times it is not that stress is always a negative or detrimental to an animal or a person. It can be pleasurable also. So for example, many of you will be actively involved in sports. So you are straining yourself while maybe you are playing football, and you will be running around a lot. It is a stress to your body, but you feel the pleasure of it. But you cannot play football for the whole day. Why? Because gradually you exhaust out, and the pleasurable part comes down, and it becomes you will have your general adaptation starts at certain point, and if you are not able to adapt, slowly it will become detrimental to your health. So this prolonged adaptation can affect the production of animals also, and then there will be when this happens, excess adaptation will result in excess cortisol level. Excess cortisol level can cause immunosuppression, and thus the animal may gradually becomes immunosuppressed. So that will lead to another other sets of events. Then stress can be a primary determinant also. This is very evident in case of capture myopathy. So when you are when animals like especially deers are captured, what happens is that the stress induces a lot of physiological reaction, and many a times animal may die because of this myopathy. So myopathy happens and animal dies. So here stress acts as the primary. Then there is porcine stress syndrome, which is connected to malignant hyperthermia, where the genetic combination of these determinants of the pig results in failure to adapt the animal adapt to higher ambient temperature, and then the animal can easily succumb. So that is porcine stress syndrome. So these are areas where stress acts as a primary determinant. Stress can be a secondary determinant also, as I told you about the immunosuppression as a part of adaptation. So as the body tries to adapt, then there will be a loss of production, then it have to compromise at many points, and then thus it will lead to a suppressed immune system, and then the susceptibility of animal increases tremendously. So those are the environmental determinants. Now, so it is not a mere presence of factors in the host, factors of the agent, or factors of the environment to present individually and remain there. This always there is a level of interdependence between these triads. So this interdependent operation of the factors of host, agent, and environment is called as interaction. So there should be an interaction between the within or between these triads for diseases to happen, or those interdependence are depended upon by people like us to control the disease also. Okay, so those are known as interactions, and two examples are or two things we need to have an idea regarding interaction. One is the disease that are caused by mixed agents. So many a times a single agent can cause a disease, but when it comes to a production system, the many of these severe diseases has been already taken care of. Okay, because by introducing biosecurity, by introducing vaccination, many other things, we can control, or we can greatly eliminate the possibility of many of these infectious diseases. But when it comes to an intensive production system, there are certain diseases where more than one agent can act together, and this combination can produce disease, and these are classified into two. So those are the where one group where there may be one or two or more agents. Each of these agents will be able to produce a disease in its own way. So individually it can produce disease, but when they combine, they will produce a higher risk of infection or higher incidence of disease than when they are acting singly or individually. Then there are certain other diseases where both of these agents are individually, they won't be causing any disease, but when they combine together, or when both of these factors are present, then not factors, when both of these agents are present, then only the disease will be precipitated in the farm. One example is about foot rot. So you know that foot rot is caused by Sphaerophorus necrophorus. Sphaerophorus in itself cannot produce foot rot in an intact foot of an animal. For that, the foot has to be, or the hoof has to be damaged or remaining in a wet environment for a prolonged time. So there is one level of interaction where it is interacting with the environment. Now, when this animal remains in the wet, damp soil or something for a very long time, and there is presence of this organism, then it will create a mild or the invasion happens, and a mild sign of foot rot is produced. It will be there, but it will be relatively mild. But once this organism enters, invades, and the first line of defense is opened up, then there will be super infection with other bacteria like Truparella and Dichelobacter, and that will result in severe or very severe lesions or severe foot rot. So that is how. So foot rot, Sphaerophorus in itself can cause foot rot to some extent, but when these two are combined, then the severity greatly increases. Similarly, then there is example of coccidia in chicken, where the occurrence of coccidiosis will increase the risk of Clostridium perfringens and thereby causes hemorrhagic enteritis in turkeys. So that is how the diseases happen when multiple agents work together. So there are different levels of interaction happening between the triads, the epidemiological triads. This can be grossly classified into two, biological and statistical. So biological interaction happens when there is a physical or chemical reaction between the two determinants. So example can be, so this is also known as a mechanical interaction also. So biological interaction means a mechanical interaction where there is a association between the two determinants and they are producing a physical or chemical change. It can be, the interaction between the antigen on the surface of an agent and the receptor on the surface of a host. Now when this interaction happens and the interaction produces a effect which is much more high than what is expected from individual factors, is known as synergism. This level of synergism between the host and the agent, or between multiple agents on a host, has led to the coining of a new term called as syndemic. So syndemic is the synergism between coexisting diseases. For example, in case of tuberculosis and HIV infection, it is seen that the amount of the survival of a human being infected with both HIV and tuberculosis is much less than the survival of a man having either tuberculosis or HIV infection. So that is known as that is known as syndemics, and the effect of syndemics is aggravated by other socio-economic conditions also. So for example, a person with a person with the TB, co-infection of TB and this thing, HIV, the survival is much more, or the burden of the survival will be, burden of this disease will be more when the socio-economic condition of such a person or a group of people is very poor. So that is known as syndemic. So it's a new term, just I wanted to share the term with you. Then so that is biological level of interaction. Then there is statistical level of interaction. So interactions are not merely physical always. There can be a quantitative effect also. So there will be a background amount of disease that is constantly there. Then there will be certain interaction between any of the determinants that will change the frequency of occurrence of the disease or the distribution of the disease. So there will be a background, then there will be an interaction. This interaction will result in variation in the frequency of the disease. So the background, there will be a change in the back, or it will be different from what happens, the baseline or the background value. So this quantitative variation according to, or depending upon the level of interaction, different strength of association, is called as statistical interactions. The frequency of the outcome of the statistical interaction will vary with the strength of association, and this variation or this change in frequency can be broadly classified into two ways. Those are additive variations or additive interaction and non-additive interaction. So additive interaction means, so if the background level of occurrence, suppose a disease is there and we estimate the presence of disease, it can be incidence, it can be odds ratio, it can be anything. So we are calculating, and it is found that the background occurrence is A, and with the presence of, then suppose there are two factors, and with the presence of one factor, suppose X, presence of one factor, then the occurrence changes from A to A plus 5. Then if the or A to 5A, then if the occurrence, there is a second factor and the occurrence changes from A to 2A. Now if the interaction is additive, that means if there is presence of both factor x and factor y, then the new occurrence becomes 5a plus 2a, totally 7a. So that is an additive interaction. It's always quantitative. It's always about the occurrence of disease. It is always quantitative. It's not about the quality of a disease. Then there is non-additive. So non-additive means anything other than additive. The most common feature is multiplicative interaction. So suppose it is, you know, with x it is 5a and y it is 2a. Then if it is a multiplicative interaction, the occurrence of disease increases from a to 5 into 2, that is 10a. So that is non-additive interaction. So there are these methods are used to, you know, is used in modeling of diseases. So we estimate the quantitatively estimate the impact of a determinant on a disease. Then we will see how many factors are there and how they are interacting, and we will use either an additive model or non-additive model to see various features. For example, an additive modeling is used when you have to assess the importance of a factor, and a non-additive model is used to assess the or elucidate the causes, the causes of a disease. So that is how interactions operate and how we model diseases. That is how interactions happen, and how the quantification is used for modeling disease occurrence. So that finishes the determinants of disease. Thank you.